Go.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to FAFSA-CASFA Fundamentals Part 2. Today we'll be talking about completing the applications and where to go from there. My name is Emily Carlson. I am the Program Coordinator at Denver Scholarship Foundation. I'm here with Natasha Garfield, who is the Director of Scholarships and Financial Aid. So today we're going to be doing a quick review of the FAFSA-CASFA Fundamentals Part 1. We'll go into filling out the applications. So we'll show you some screenshots of what the FAFSA and CASFA look like. We'll talk about what the applications mean. So at the end, you'll get a number called the SAI and a submission summary. So we'll talk about what those are and how to talk about them with students and families. And then we'll talk about next steps. So after you submit the applications, what comes next. I do want to mention that we will not be covering every question on the FAFSA or CASFA today. We'll be highlighting questions that can be tricky or where students and parents may get stuck. So with those screenshots, again, we're not going to be showing everything, and we also don't expect you to remember everything, but we just want to give you an idea of what it looks like, give you some tips and tricks, and of course we'll also be sharing resources that you can use to practice and to view every question before you start supporting families, or if you have questions that come up later. So just doing a quick review of the last time we went over whether a student should fill out the FAFSA or CASFA. Students who are U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, or other eligible non-citizens will complete the FAFSA. And again, there is a page on the FSA website with a full list of the eligible non-citizens. And then undocumented students or students who aren't eligible for federal aid will complete the CASFA. We do have the FAFSA or CASFA infographic in the virtual binder, which can help you and your students decide which application they should complete. We also went over dependency. So just as a very quick reminder, most students who are under the age of 24 will be considered dependent, which is on FAFSA or CASFA, which again is different from dependent on taxes. So if they're dependent on FAFSA or CASFA, that just means that they have to include parent information. Some common exceptions that we see are students who have been in foster care, who have a legal guardian, or do not have stable housing. A resource that we have for this is the dependency questions in the virtual binder. And that just goes through every possible scenario for whether a student would be independent, so you can determine whether they need to provide parent info. We also went over contributors. So a contributor on the FAFSA or CASFA is someone who is required to provide information on the application and consents to release their federal tax information to the federal student aid. So that includes a student, either their biological or adoptive parents, a step-parent, and potentially a student's spouse if they're married. Just a quick reminder, legal guardians are not contributors, even if they financially support the student. So again, only biological parents, step-parents, and adoptive parents are going to be contributors. You can use the parent wizard, which is linked in the slides, to determine who will be a contributor for the student's application. We also went over account creation. So as a reminder, everybody who is a contributor on the FAFSA needs to create a studentaid.gov account, which allows contributors to add their information onto the application and sign the FAFSA. For CASFA, it's a little bit different, but the student will also need to create an account on the CDEHE website. And then once the student completes the application, they'll invite their parent to create an account. So some pro tips, make sure that if a family is doing FAFSA that they create their accounts at least 3 days before. It just takes a few days for those accounts to get verified, and you can't start the application until that's been done. Or shouldn't. And then if one or both parents or both of the married parents of a dependent student do not have a social security number, each of those parents will need to create their own account, regardless of whether they filed filing jointly or otherwise. So again, that was just a very quick review of last time. If you have questions, we did send out some resources. If you missed that, you can email me or Natasha and we can make sure that you have the information from last time. But now we're going to move into the content for this training, which is really more about starting or completing the applications and where to go from there. So again, I think I already said this, but I really want to emphasize you won't remember everything that we cover today, and that's okay. We'll be sharing the slides and follow-up so you can have them for a reference. And then we really do want to emphasize that accuracy matters. So you want to have students and families be extremely attentive when they're typing. There's a lot of the issues that we see just come from lack of attention to detail. And the FAFSA especially is super sensitive. And students will also, sometimes they don't know their parents' birthdays, and so they'll guess, but they don't want to ask them. But this is a situation where it is very important for the information to be accurate. And then also just having everybody make sure to read the questions carefully. There are some, words that look really similar, words or phrases that look really similar, but they mean different things. And so it's just really important to read carefully and slowly and ask questions, not try to rush. And then when in doubt, read the question and then pause to check your resources. It doesn't have to be done super quickly. It needs to be done accurately. So hopefully you all had time to look at the pre-work. We wanted to share some resources to help you feel prepared for this training. If you didn't have time or maybe got too caught up in break, that's okay. You still have those resources. We would encourage you to look at the FAFSA prototype. Practice just helps you feel more comfortable supporting students and families with the applications. And of course, we'll share all the links to these resources in the follow-up materials. But we also have, since last time, there's now been a preview presentation that FSA created. So that shows screenshots of the whole FAFSA. It's a very long presentation, but it's pretty useful. It shows you exactly what the application is going to look like, and then you can feel more prepared once you're actually there with students and families. You can also use the FAFSA PDF, so that's like a paper version of the FAFSA. It's available in English and Spanish. And then just remember, a lot of what we're talking about is FAFSA. We will show screenshots and talk about CASFA as well, but just know that a lot of the CASFA questions mirror the FAFSA. There are some differences in the logistics of it, such as creating accounts, signing, and some of the like back-end logic, but at the core, most of the questions are pretty similar. Okay, so now getting started with the application. So to get started, contributors will go to fafsa.gov, and then you can see the arrow at the top there. If you're working with a family who's Spanish speaking, you can switch the application to Spanish at the top. You can see it says English or Espanol. It's pretty small in this picture, but we just wanted you to know where on the website you can find that. And so once you're there, you can log in. The 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 FAFSA will have you decide whether you are a student or a parent. So the contributor will choose the appropriate role. Just a tip, it might be easier if a parent doesn't have a social security number, it might be easier for them to start the application because later on they'll be inviting the student. And that can just eliminate some of the matching issues that we'll talk a little bit about later. So just kind of store that away if you're working with a parent who doesn't have a social security number. It might be easier for them to start the application rather than the student. But in many cases, it's fine either way and the student can start the application. But again, we want to emphasize accuracy and reading carefully. Make sure that you pay attention to whose information is being requested for each question, student or parent. So it'll have language like Does the student have this, or the parent's address, that kind of thing. So it's really important to distinguish whose information you're providing. I'll pass it on to Natasha for this next part.
Hi, everyone. So now we're going to move into some of the content questions after folks get logged in to the FAFSA or CASFA. One of the questions that students will often pause and ask about is this question, which asks for the student's state of legal residence. Parents will also see the same question asking about the parent's state. And this is really asking about where the student or parent makes their permanent home. It is not asking about their immigration status. So if they if their home is in Colorado, that is what they will select as their state of legal residence. The arrow on this slide is pointing to a little I in a circle. That is a tooltip that you or families you're working with can click on to read more information about whichever question you happen to be on. So you'll see that throughout the application and can be really helpful if you are looking for more of an explanation. Next up, each contributor is going to see a request to provide consent and approval to move forward with the FAFSA. This piece happens in the FAFSA, but is a little bit different on the CASFA side of things. So when the contributor is reading through this information, what it's asking them for is permission to transfer their tax information from the IRS to the FAFSA. All contributors have to agree to provide consent and approval in order for the student to be eligible for federal aid. If a parent provides consent and approval, it doesn't mean that they are agreeing to pay anything towards the cost of college. It means only that they are agreeing to have their information shared. And just a reminder that parents of dependent students are required to provide information on the FAFSA, even if they don't support the student financially and can't or won't contribute to the cost of college. And another note here is that even if a person didn't pay taxes, wasn't required to file taxes, they are still required to provide consent and approval. And what happens in that situation is that the IRS will confirm that they did not file taxes in whatever the applicable tax year was. Moving on, after the student or parent or spouse has the opportunity to read through this notice about consent and approval, they will decide whether to click approve or decline to continue on in the form. If they select decline, meaning that they are not agreeing to provide consent and approval, they're then going to see this pop-up that tells them about the consequences. We want to really encourage all contributors to take the time to carefully read through this consent and approval page before they agree. And once again, as Emily mentioned, it is easy to toggle the page from English to Spanish or Spanish to English to make sure that the individual can read it in the language that is most comfortable for them. We want to pause here and emphasize that students, parents, spouses may have questions and concerns about how their information will be used after it's submitted on the FAFSA. And this is a really valid concern and something that they should be well informed about. We do not want to push them to move forward without having sufficient time to process and make an informed decision. And for that reason, even though the FAFSA is now open and the CASFA will open on December 1st, we don't want to create a sense of urgency for families that makes them feel like they have to make a decision without enough time to think. The Higher Education Act, which is the act that provides for federal student aid, limits the sharing of information from the FAFSA. but we can't make any promises or guarantees that the information won't be shared with other federal agencies. So if parents are feeling concerned, we really want them to have as much time as they need to read and understand FAFSA's privacy notices. Those are available in English or Spanish, and also to seek the advice of an attorney before they decide even to create a studentaid.gov account, because once the account is created, they will have shared some of their personally identifying information with the US government. We're going to have time to go into this in more detail during our deeper dive training, but we did want to highlight it for today since we know that many families are going to be eager to get started on the financial aid process now that the applications are open. Once the family has had enough time to learn about the privacy considerations and make the decision about moving forward with the FAFSA, the next piece that they will see is this new screen. This was not part of the form last year, so those of you who are familiar with it, this will be new for you. This is a screen telling the contributor that the system is pulling their information from the IRS. So what happens if the contributor has a Social Security number and they say approve the consent and approval, then the IRS system connects to the FAFSA and the information is imported over. And in the past, the family had no idea that that was happening in the background, and now this screen is letting them know that that's happening. Once the import is complete, they will see one of two screens. It'll either show them the top screen if the IRS did not locate any records for that contributor. They'll then enter their financial information manually, typing it into the form, or they'll see the bottom message, which means that the import was successful. And it means that many of the questions about income and tax information will be populated directly from the IRS, so they will not have to type them into the form. It's important to note here that any contributor who doesn't have a Social Security number will manually enter their financial information, even if they did file taxes with an ITIN. The system is not currently set up to use ITINs to pull that information from the IRS. Next up, students will see a question about their college or career school plans. This is one that can sometimes be a little bit confusing for our students who have been doing concurrent enrollment because they know that they've already earned college credit. However, if they're a current 12th grader, as they're doing the FAFSA, they should select first year, even if they do have some existing concurrent enrollment credit, because this is really referring to the first time that they will have been a fully enrolled college student. Also, we've had a number of students who accidentally have selected yes in response to the question about whether the student will have their first bachelor's degree when they start the 25-26 school year. If you find that a student is not asked for parent information and has been classified as independent and you're not really sure why, this may be the reason. So I would encourage you to carefully check what the student responds here. They should be saying no, they will not have their first bachelor's degree if they are a 12th grader. These are the dependency questions that we've referred to previously. So the screen is titled Student Personal Circumstances, and these checkboxes are used to determine whether the student will be considered dependent or independent for the FAFSA. Most students who are reviewing these questions will be answering none of these apply, but it is really important for students to read through all of them to make sure. We do have a new resource which we're sharing here, which is a legal guardianship decision tree that'll help students think through whether they are in a legal guardianship, and identify the documentation that they need. And remember, legal guardianship means that they have a court order from a U.S. court, not from a notario in Mexico, that references legal guardianship. Note that dependency is also based on age, marital status, and having a bachelor's degree. Those questions don't appear as part of this screen, but they're addressed elsewhere on the FAFSA and CASFA. Next, students will see this question asking about whether they are unaccompanied and are either experiencing homelessness or are at risk of homelessness. It's really important here to not skip over that word unaccompanied. That means that they are not with their parents. So if a student is experiencing homelessness or they have unstable housing, but they are with their parent, then they are going to answer no here. If the student answers yes, they will see some additional questions gathering other information about their housing situation. And it's important to note that if the student does answer yes here, they will need to be in touch with the financial aid office to provide some additional documentation. We have another new resource, a McKinney-Vento 101 guide that will help you support students in this process. And it is important to note that a student can qualify for McKinney-Vento when they are experiencing unstable housing with their parent. So just because they qualify for McKinney-Vento does not necessarily mean that they will respond yes to the homelessness questions on the FAFSA. There are some situations where students are unable to provide parent information because they're not able to contact their parent, or being in contact with their parent would put them at risk of harm. So this list helps to think through scenarios that might be considered unusual circumstances for FAFSA or CASFA purposes. It's not an exclusive list. There could be situations that aren't specified here, but generally speaking, this list will cover most of the situations that a student might be experiencing that would fall within this category of unusual circumstances. When a student answers yes here, what it means is that the college will do a review of their situation. It's sometimes called a professional judgment. And when the college does that review, they will be asking the student to provide some additional information. Generally, that's going to come in the form of a letter from a third party, which could be a school counselor, it could be a social worker, could be a clergy member, someone who's familiar with the family situation and can confirm what the student is saying. It's another important note here that this does not include parents who refuse to provide information, even if they have a good reason for not wanting to provide the information. This really is about situations where the student is unable to locate or contact their parent or safely obtain that information. Once the student has reviewed all of those dependency questions, then the next thing that happens in the FAFSA is they will see a screen telling them about their dependency status. So if you're working with 12th graders, most of them are going to see a dependency status of dependent student, meaning that they will provide their parent information. They'll see a message saying that they are independent if they're over age 24, age 24 or over, if they're married, if they've earned that bachelor's degree, or they selected any of the items on that list of personal circumstances that we've already talked about. If they are considered independent, it means they won't see questions about their parents on the FAFSA. This is a great place to pause and think whether you expected that the student would be independent, whether the student expected that they would be considered independent. If that comes as a surprise to either of you, that's a great opportunity to go back and review their answers to the previous questions and make any corrections that might be needed. And remember that if the student did select any of those boxes for personal circumstances, they do need to follow up with the financial aid office to provide documentation. The next question asks dependent students if their parents are refusing to provide information on the FAFSA. So some of you may have been familiar with this question last year. It was presented in a much more confusing way. Federal Student Aid has done a lot of work to make it much more clear. One of the things that they've done is that the answer is defaulted to no. So when students come to this page, it will already have the answer of no, because for most students, their parents will provide information. If the student selects yes, they're now going to see a pop-up that tells them that they will not be eligible for most federal aid. If they select yes and they don't provide parent information, they will generally only be eligible for unsubsidized student loans. And this would be a situation where none of the personal circumstances or unusual circumstances apply to them, but their parents are not willing to provide information. And as we noted when we were talking about privacy, it is possible that parents may decide that it's not in their best interest to share information with the federal government. And so we may see students who are answering yes to this question this year. So once the student answers that question about whether their parents refuse to provide information, assuming that they say no, their parents are not refusing, then they will continue on to see questions about their parents. This series of questions are also available through the Parent Wizard that Emily referenced earlier, which is a really quick and easy way families can figure out which parent will be providing information before they go ahead and create accounts and start the FAFSA or CASFA. That Parent Wizard is available to anybody and it doesn't require a login, so it can be a really good tool to start with. This series of questions also appears on the FAFSA and CASFA themselves to help guide the family as far as who will need to be providing information. When the student continues on and has identified who's going to provide that information, they will next see some screens asking for their parents' name, date of birth, social security number if they have one, and their email address. This is one of those places where accuracy is super, super important, especially that social security number if the parents have one, or the name, date of birth, and address if they don't have one, because this is used to match the student's FAFSA to the parent's account. So the best practice is to actually be looking at the parentstudentaid.gov account when completing this section to ensure that it's going to match exactly. And as Emily mentioned, students should not guess about their parents' birth date or social. It's much more important to take a little bit of extra time and ask the parent for that information than to take a guess. And then you'll see here that it asks for the parent and then parent, spouse, or partner. We recommend that students fill in both parents' information, but only send the invitation to parent one. If it's necessary for parent two to also provide information, parent one will be prompted to invite them during the parent section of the FAFSA. And with that, oh, sorry. One more screen here. Parents who don't have a social security number will check this box indicating, or sorry, the student will check the box indicating that their parent doesn't have a social. And when they do that, they will be asked to provide their parent's address instead. And again, they do need to make sure that this matches what's on their parent's account. And now I will hand it back over to Emily.
Thanks, Natasha. So just to really, again, emphasize, when we are talking about matching the invitation to the account, that's one of the places that we saw some of the most snags last year, was with the issues with the matching. So it can be one of the trickiest parts of the FAFSA is for parents to connect to the student's application if the parent doesn't have a social security number. So the infographic here shows examples of the small differences that can prevent the parent from accessing the FAFSA form. So again, like I mentioned before, parents without a social security number can start the FAFSA and invite the student, and that sometimes eliminates some of these issues. But if a student starts the application and invites the parent, it must match exactly. So that includes things like abbreviations. Sometimes people have a hyphenated last name, sometimes there's a hyphen, sometimes it's a space. When we are looking at it, we just have to make sure that whatever is showing up for the parent on their student aid account is showing up exactly on the FAFSA. So you can see here, like 789 Sherman Street, that looks, it means the same thing, but it doesn't match exactly. So if that were entered, there it would lose the invitation. One of the common things that we see is that there will be like a space after the name. So on the third line there, you can see it's Maria, but then there's a space, and that will throw everything off. So really just again, wanting to show how important accuracy is and exact matching. So from there, the FAFSA will ask about student citizenship. So we have the link to the page that tells you all about the eligible non-citizens. So if you are neither a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-resident, then you're not eligible for federal aid and you should do CASFA. So if you're selecting that third option there, you should just exit and go to CASFA. But again, this only applies to students, not a parent or a spouse. So this is, again, asking student citizenship status. So make sure that you answer accordingly. So yeah, just take a second. Remember back to the beginning when FAFSA shows a message about the IRS transfer, when Natasha showed that screenshot. So if the student saw a message confirming that the data was transferred, then they won't see the questions about income and taxes. It'll just be automatically added. So just remind students and parents to pay attention to the headers and the questions. Again, student or parent. So if the student filed taxes and pulled information from the IRS, it'll be entered already. If they didn't, or if they didn't need to file taxes, it'll have them manually enter the information. So a lot of the questions, like maybe they didn't work, and so they'll get asked their income, but you can't just leave it blank. You have to put a 0. And then if you're manually entering info, you can use the where to find this info link or the FAFSA PDF. So that's a really good time to make use of the paper FAFSA, as we call it, which is of course in the binder. And that will tell you the tax line references. So it'll say, look at line 8B, and you can go to the taxes and get the information that you need. And then another pro tip is that you can use the tax filing thresholds to answer questions about whether to file. So if you're thinking that somebody's kind of on the brink of whether they need to file taxes, or maybe you're just not sure at all, we have a tax filing threshold resource in the financial aid binder in the tax folder that gives you the cutoffs for requirement to file taxes. So within the student financials, the student will be asked to report how much money they have right now. One way that I usually like to phrase this is like, how much money do you have at the end of each month after you've paid your bills or like rent, whatever it may be. Like, once you have fulfilled those monthly obligations, how much money do you have? From there, the students will add colleges. They can send the FAFSA application to up to 20 colleges. So this is just indicating which schools will get the information from their FAFSA. If they are applying for FAFSA and then later they realize that they want to add another school, they can go back in and edit it. But it's a good idea to just add any college that they're like at all considering. Hopefully they're not considering more than 20. So we usually just encourage them, say, if you've thought about applying there, you may as well add it to FAFSA so that they can have your information and keep it open as an option. We also have a resource in the binder, the Colorado School Codes. That just allows you to search a school by code rather than putting in like the state and the name of it and going through the search. It just makes it a little bit faster for Colorado schools. So reviewing and signing for the student, just always encourage students to pause for a second so that you can look through it together. There's a lot of times where you take that extra minute to read through the answers and you find like a little error or something that could have maybe caused problems later on. So it's always a good idea to just take that extra minute to look and review your work and do that with the student, of course. On the screen, you can also check the status of the parent invitation. So you can see that's what that arrow is pointing to. It tells you whether the invite was sent, open, all of that kind of thing. So after signing, so if the student starts the FAFSA, they will get a note at the end that says almost there. And that's what the screenshot is. It says you're almost there, and it doesn't say congratulations because in this instance, the parent has not yet completed their portion of the FAFSA application. So once all of the required contributors have completed their sections and signed, then you'll get a congratulations screen, which we will share later on. So now going to the parent side of the application, if a student started the application and invited the parent will receive an email that says help complete student's name form. So if they get that email, they should be able to click on the Get Started button to get to the studentaid.gov login page where they can use their account to log in. If the parent doesn't receive the email, that's kind of where we go back to that screen where we talked about the matching errors. If they don't get it, it's likely that the student maybe typed in the email wrong or there was a matching issue. Sometimes it ends up in spam, so just check that as well. Once the parent logs in on the Student Aid website or studentaid.gov website, they should see the option to accept the invitation, or they can just navigate to the My Activity within the dashboard as well. Once they do that, they should see a pop-up reminder that they'll need to provide personal information, share tax info, essentially just contribute to the FAFSA. If they don't see it, that's where the matching issue is. So if it's not showing up, that will be the indication that there was the matching issue. So then it asks about federal benefits. It doesn't ask for specific amounts for it, but you'll just have parents check the box if they receive any of the benefits. So it's going to be like SNAP, WIC, TANF, that kind of thing. So if they receive those benefits, they can just check that box. If not, they can say none of these apply. Just a quick note, Colorado offers free and reduced lunch for everybody. So generally that's not one that you should select because it's universal. So from there, it asks about family size. The green box shows the calculation based on the tax filing. So the numbers in the number of parents and dependents that were on the taxes. If that is different from the current situation, we should have families update it to accurately reflect the total number of parents and dependents in the household. So that should include children and other dependents who live with the parents and receive more than half of their financial support from them. And then so just know that the student is already included in the calculation, so they shouldn't be added. With the parent contributors, the best practice is to have parent tax forms available. So even if you think that the tax information should be transferred from the IRS, which hopefully it will, for parents who do have Social Security numbers, it's really helpful to have the tax forms there for answering questions about tax filing situations or tax filing status. It also is helpful for what we were talking about on the last slide about knowing the family number or household size. So again, pay attention to what's entered for each question. One of the common mistakes that we see is entering the same amount in income earned from work and income paid tax. So those are definitely different things. So again, just paying attention to detail and reading the questions carefully. So with that in mind, parents will manually complete the income and tax questions if they don't have a Social Security number or if their marital status has changed since the taxes were filed. So again, every mixed status family will have the parents manually entering their information. And then also just know that the form's logic may skip asset questions based on low income or federal benefits received. So it uses a calculation to determine who needs to include information about assets. And so just know that with some students, you'll see those questions and with some students you won't. But we do also have a new resource to help with calculating assets. It is in the binder. So in some cases, the parent, spouse, or partner will, or both parents and both the parent and their spouse or partner will need to complete the FAFSA. So that's the case if parents are married or live together but filed taxes separately, or one or both of them don't have a Social Security number. So if this is the case, the FAFSA form will have parent one add information, and then if needed, it'll have them invite the second parent to also add information. So once the parent has completed all of the questions that they are being asked, they will see an almost there or congratulations message depending on whether the student and the other parent have finished their section. So again, if there is still any contributor that has not finished their section, you'll see that almost there image from a previous slide. But if everybody's done with their part, then you'll get the congratulations screen. And so this means that the form is complete. All required contributors have provided consent and signed, and it's off to be processed. So that's a lot of information about completing the application, but one of the most important parts is being able to understand what happens next and what the information means. So once a student's FAFSA has been processed, which will take a couple weeks probably, they'll receive an email letting them know that their submission summary is ready to view. So the submission summary is made up of 4 tabs. There's an eligibility overview, the FAFSA form answers, school information, and next steps. So each of these has different information, but the eligibility overview gives an estimate of the federal aid the student may be eligible for. The answers gives a list of all of the answers that the student provided and all of the answers that the contributors provided, which can be helpful because then you can review them for any questions, or excuse me, corrections. School information, you can If students are curious whether they remember to include a school, you can go back and check that, or if they want to add one, you can do that as well. And then next steps often will let students know if there's has been an issue with their FAFSA or they need to make corrections, or if they need have additional steps. Okay, so one of the most important terms that we use with the FAFSA and also the CASFA is the Student Aid Index. So this is provided in the eligibility overview tab of the submission summary, or in the CASFA student summary, which is something that we'll get into next. But essentially, how I like to explain the Student Aid Index to students and families is it's a number that gives schools an idea of your family's financial situation. And then from there, they can tell how, if you need money to pay for college. So technically, what it is a number that is used by colleges to determine the amount of aid a student will be eligible for. It ranges from negative 1,000 or 1,500 to essentially infinity. And it just, again, is kind of a benchmark that colleges use. It's not something that is completely static, and if you have a certain SAI, it means you get this much money. It just kind of gives colleges an idea of what they're working with the student. It also may change based on additional info requested by the college. So if a student ends up having to give more context or verification, or if a student or parent corrects their info, the SAI may change. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, it's calculated for both FAFSA and CASFA. It's the same formula. But just to emphasize, it is not an exact predictor of what financial aid a student will get, and it is also not the amount of money that the student will have to pay for college. So previously it was called the expected family contribution, and a common myth was that that was the exact number that a student will have to pay to go to college. That is not the case. Again, it is just an index number that colleges use as a benchmark. So after the student submits the FAFSA, there's a video that kind of talks about what happens. If you haven't had a chance to watch the video yet, it was included in the pre-work. We also linked it on this image in the slide. We would definitely encourage you to go back and watch it after the session. We don't necessarily have time to watch the video today, but it does have really informative, it's very informative. And then also, we're crossing our fingers, but Federal Student Aid also promises that the videos that they publish to help people with the process will be available in Spanish soon. But currently, subtitles are available in Spanish if you're watching it on YouTube. I'll pass it back to Natasha for some CASFA.
All right, so as we mentioned earlier, generally speaking, the questions that students and parents will respond to are the same on FAFSA and FAFSA and CASFA. So all of the questions about income, taxes, household size, those questions are shared between the two forms. And CASFA does use the same formula as FAFSA to calculate the student aid index. What students will do when they're ready to get started is create their CASFA account. The URL is on this slide. It is pretty gnarly, so we do recommend that students just Google complete CASFA or CASFA login, and it will take them right to this login page. The main differences that you'll see here between the CASFA and FAFSA are in creating an account, logging in, and signing. It's an important note that CASFA does not connect to the IRS. It doesn't connect to the federal government in any way. So all contributors will be manually entering their financial information. Nothing is going to be imported directly from the IRS. So when the student is getting started, they will start in the document section after they've created their CASFA account. and they will look for the 2025-26 form. Then they're going to select the blue button, which lets them start, edit, or complete a form. And from that point, the form will open up and they'll see all of the questions that it'll ask about dependency, income, all of the same things that we just went over for the FAFSA. On the left-hand side of their screen, students will see a list of all of the different sections of the form, which can help them just understand where they are moving through it and what kind of questions they will be answering next. And then once students have completed all of the questions, they will go through this process to review and sign their CASFA. So the first step will be clicking the button to e-sign the form. Then they'll be asked to confirm their first and last names and enter their password. So that's how they're electronically signing. Then they're going to have the option to download and review a PDF of their answers. So that is a little bit different than FAFSA. FAFSA shows them a screen that they can just open each section to review what answers they provided. Here, they'll download the PDF before they actually click the button to sign so that they do have a chance to review and go back if they need to edit anything. If they decide that they want to change any of the information they've entered, they'll select the option to review and update. And then once they're ready to move forward, they're going to click the button that asks them to request parent signature. And this is the point at which parents will get involved in the CASFA process. This is the major difference for parents between FAFSA and CASFA. They don't need to create an account in advance. In fact, they really can't until the student sends them this request to join the student's CASFA. After the student selects that button to request their parent's signature, the next screen is going to show them the parents who they entered in their CASFA, and they'll select which one they want to send the invitation to. They'll then enter the parent's email. So this is one of those spots where it's super important to be careful with the typing to make sure it's accurate. And then they'll click the button to send the invitation to their parent. It's important to note that the student does need to use an email address that is different than their own, first of all, and that the parent can actually access. So oftentimes what makes the most sense is that the student may create an email for their parent and help the parent to access it, and then to access the CASFA. Once the parent receives that invitation and enters their information to sign the CASFA, then the student is going to see that their CASFA status is updated to satisfied. You can see that it may be a little bit hard to see on this small screen, but it shows at the top of the screen there. And then once it is satisfied, then the student can check the My Documents section, and it will show them their SAI, which is highlighted with the first arrow on this screen. And then they can go to the My Documents section to download a copy of their completed CASFA. And that is essentially the same as the FAFSA submission summary. If the student decides that they do need to make any changes after their parent has signed the CASFA, then they'll select the option to edit their completed form, and that's how they can make any corrections or add any colleges. And this is giving you a close-up view of the CASFA student summary. So you'll notice that the arrow here is again pointing to their student aid index or SAI. And this is also a great opportunity to review the information that they submitted and which colleges they've included so they can be sure to send their CASFA results to all of the colleges they're considering. All right, so now we're going to take just a moment to reflect on how you would explain the SAI to a student. So the slide here refers to working in groups of 2. That's obviously not possible if you're viewing this recording on your own, but instead we would encourage you to pause the recording and maybe jot down a few notes about how you would explain the SAI to a student and their parent, or at least just think about it in your mind. And we'll give you just a moment to pause. So what we would suggest here is just to explain to the student and parent that the SAI is a number that colleges will use to figure out how much financial aid the student is eligible for. Well, that was a lot. What we want to emphasize is that completing the CASFA or FAFSA is really the first step in the financial aid process. It's super important for students to pay attention once they've completed their financial aid application, because in many instances, there will be some follow-up that they need to do. So first off, students need to log into the student portals of all the colleges that they're accepted to, or at least any that they are seriously considering. They should receive instructions about how to activate those portals when they get emails notifying them that they've been accepted by the college. Once they're logged into the portal, they want to look for the financial aid tab. That's where the college will post messages about any additional information that is needed before the college can complete their aid offer. It will likely take at least a few weeks, depending on when the student completes their CASFA or FAFSA, for the college to process those aid offers. Students should also be on the lookout for emails from the financial aid office. Those emails will sometimes go to the email address that was used on FAFSA or CASFA. So students should be sure to be checking that email as well as their college email once it's set up. As we mentioned before, there are students who need to proactively check in with the financial aid offices because they will need to provide some additional information. And those are students who are independent because they checked one of the boxes on the personal circumstances page, like legal guardianship. It also includes students who indicated that they are unaccompanied and either experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, and any students who indicated that they have unusual circumstances, meaning that they're not able to contact their parents or it would be unsafe to contact them. And then it might be in the student's best interest to reach out to financial aid if there are some questions about tax filing. So we'll talk more about that in later sessions, but one example might be that if the parents are married or living together, but each filed head of household, that can be a situation where the college will often direct the family to refile. So the student may want to proactively reach out about that situation. A reminder that students can make corrections to information on their FAFSA that was perhaps entered incorrectly. They will do that from the FAFSA form answers page of their submission summary. And we just talked about how they would do that for the CASFA. One thing to keep in mind here is that if what they are correcting is something related to income because the family's income has changed since it was reported on their 2023 taxes, that will actually be handled in a different way by requesting an income appeal from the financial aid office. All right. Well, we have come to the end of our time together. So thank you very much for your attention and to your dedication to learning this material. We just wanted to review a few key takeaways before we close. First off, I'm sure you've heard this plenty from us today, but accuracy really does matter. Please encourage students and families to take their time and really make sure that the information they're typing is correct. It's well worth the extra minutes to not have to go back and try to fix those errors down the road. Don't assume that you or the student or family you're working with knows what the question is asking for or that the student or parent understands it. Allow enough time for everybody to really read the questions carefully and talk about how to respond. Um, Again, completing the application is often just the first step in the financial aid process, and we want students to be prepared for that, to know that they need to be on the lookout for any requests from their financial aid office for additional information, so that they can get those aid offers in a timely fashion and be well prepared with their plan for how to pay for college before the school year starts. And then probably most importantly, please remember that we're sharing lots of great resources. You should not feel like you need to know all of this information. The most important thing that you can take away today is knowing where to find the resources and asking for help if you need it. Finally, we would ask you to just take a few moments now before you continue on with your day to write down a brief summary for yourself of each of the sections that we've covered in this training and reflect on any remaining questions that you might have. So we've talked about completing the applications, the student aid index and submission summaries, and what students can expect as far as follow-up and next steps. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at a future training.